Good morning, everybody. I'm Anna Miller and I work in Electron's assurance team. I'm presenting with V Sharma from the REC performance assurance team. And we're working and presenting together because qualification is a joint deliverable from code bodies. And we've been doing an awful lot of cross-code collaboration in order to facilitate that. So we can move to the next slide and we'll start to give you an update on where we are with qualification. So we're going to be covering an overall overview, the timeline for MHHS qualification, the qualification deliverables, which are the qualification approach and plan and the qualification assessment document, and placing reliance policy, which we're working with alongside the programme. So if we can move on to the next slide. So first of all, we wanted to provide a bit of an overview to set the scene. There are a huge number of new requirements and new systems that are going to be in place for MHHS. In order for those to work effectively, we need to make sure that participants have the right processes and systems in place for those to work effectively. In order to make sure that's the case, we've got a qualification process. Now, the requirements for that qualification process are set out within Section C of the Balancing and Settlement Code, which introduces all of the governance requirements for the MHHS programme. And it sets out very clearly that all participants are required to undertake qualification. From that, it points to a qualification plan, which is going to set out the lower level detail. And that's what we've been working on up to date with the qualification working group. Beneath that, we're going to have another document, which is called the Qualification Assessment Document. And that document is going to set out the detailed requirements that participants will have to work through. So if you like the one-to-one sort of requirement scripts, testing requirements alongside the additional material. So as I mentioned there, the responsibility is on code bodies, both BSc and REC, and we're working together on that. But we've been developing it through programme governance. So it's been undertaking that through we'll just wait for the feedback. So we've been undertaking the development through the qualification working group, which meets once a month. It's always really nice hearing yourself. Okay, so yeah, we've been undertaking the development of that through the qualification working group. That's an open group, anybody can join it. If you wish to join it, then please approach the PMO. I can see, I think, a number of you that have already been participating in that group. And essentially, that's what we're going to be developing the approach and plan through. We've already got onto the first version of that plan, and then the subsequent lower level requirements as well. I think the key thing we wanted to call out is that going through qualification is essential if you want to participate in the MHHS market. It facilitates the M14 milestone for suppliers to be ready to undertake and pick up MPANs under the new TOM. And it also enables agents to work effectively with those suppliers and be able to deliver M15 at the end of migration. If we can move to the next slide, please. So this is a bit of a development on the fact that there are different routes to qualification, as Claire was just highlighting there. So we have two routes. We have the SIT route and the non-SIT route. And essentially, we're looking to align those processes as much as possible. They should be very, very similar, but they're going to be taking place at different times and in slightly different ways. So the SIT process is an end-to-end set of testing, which is there to ensure that the overall design works effectively well and the systems can work and integrate together. So participants that have gone through that SIT testing will have undertaken numerous different testing activities throughout that spectrum. However, it will be on an end-to-end basis. For qualification, what we'll be doing is taking those testing materials and adapting them so that they can work on an individual role basis and ensure that we can then qualify individual participants throughout the qualification tranches when they come. So hopefully that makes sense. We've got two separate routes. They're going to be done in slightly different ways and at different times. The SIT is going to be substantially earlier than the qualification testing. On top of that, we do have some additional requirements to make sure everybody's geared up and ready for MHHS. So that's going to be operational controls, security controls, those kind of requirements as well. But those are going to be in place for both the SIT participants and the non-SIT participants. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, we can move to the next slide, please. And V will take us through the qualification timeline.
Thank you, Anna. Put this here, brilliant. So on the screen over here, we've got a high-level timeline for you for qualification, how things will work. We've got the project level 1 milestones on top. So we've got the M10 milestone by when all distribution network operators need to be ready to be accepting new MPANs. Therefore, if you see, our SIT as well as non-SIT LDSOs need to have qualified by that time. We've got the testing timelines for when LDSOs need to be starting or doing the actual qualification testing, but we've also got preparation time at the beginning and some governance sign-off time of about 2 months at the back of that testing tranche. Apart from the distribution network operators, we've also got tranche 0, which is the governance tranche for all SIT participants to complete their qualification requirements and get those signed off for approval. And then we have the various qualification testing tranches. So we've got 7 tranches. Just to give you an idea, we've shown you the 1st and the 7th tranche. And each of these, like in between as well, will be staggered by a month. Before each tranche, we've got the preparation time, as I stated, and at the back, we've got the sign-offs and the BSc PAB approval and the record manager approval to start your operating. We've got the M14 milestone that we're working with, so all qualification tranches would need to be completed by then. So all participants wanting to operate in the new environment would need to have been qualified by that time. We also appreciate that there needs to be a route to entry to the market at all times. Therefore, we're planning the enduring qualification, which would be post the program. That route would be available alongside as the program wraps up. So we've got those timelines that we're working towards. And then another thing to note is towards February and March next year, that's the window we're offering for all participants who are wanting to be a part of the MHHS program qualification to declare their intention to qualify to the code manager. And which tranche you get allocated, that will be determined by the code bodies over April and May next year. And details of this can also be found in the qualification approach and plan document that I think Anna's going to talk to you about next.
Thank you. Okay, to move on to the next slide, please. So V just mentioned the qualification tranches there. We've needed to put tranches in place in order to manage our capacity through qualification, and that was something that the Balancing and Settlement Code recognised in Section C. Obviously, we needed to consider carefully our approach to how we manage those tranches, how we put them together. So I think the key things we were looking at there is that we had a non-discriminatory approach to putting those together. That was cast iron within the Section C itself, that we had to be very careful about how we did that. We also wanted to make sure that we were able to support a mixed ecosystem so that when people come out the other end and into migration, that there's a mixture of participants there available to undertake migration wherever possible. We obviously wanted to make sure that people are ready. There's no point us allocating tranches and then nobody's ready to undertake the qualification testing when we get to the other end. And we also wanted to make sure that we could recognise wherever we possibly could the sort of preferences of participants themselves, so that we're not trying to shoehorn you into something that isn't appropriate for you if we can avoid it. So off the back of that, we've come up with our approach to the allocation of tranches, which is within the qualification approach and plan. So first of all, we're going to be, as we just mentioned, we're going to be asking people to set out very clearly to us their intent to qualify, and that's going to be February next year that we're scheduling that in. We'll then come back to you with your tranche allocation in May of next year. We're going to be looking at doing that based on participant preferences and first come, first served. So when I say first come, first served, it's going to be based on when people have been able to get those preferences to us, and also when they're indicating they're going to be ready. We'll then, 2 months before the tranches are going to start, we'll be checking and undertaking sets of checks to make sure people are in fact ready to qualify, and they'll be ready to go through that. We'll be looking at the participant readiness assessments as part of that. And we've also had to consider what happens if people drop out of a tranche. So essentially what we'll have to do at that point is sort of recalibrate, if you like. We'll have to look at what our capacity, look where we're able to feed people in. So that's something to sort of call out. Please be ready for your tranche if you're saying you're going to be ready for a particular one, just to avoid that kind of outcome. Okay, if we can move to the next slide, please. Okay, so we had some feedback on the tranche allocation approach that was set out when we set the qualification approach and plan out for review. And I just wanted to talk through both the concerns that were raised on the tranche allocation process and our response to those. So the first was the fact that we had the non-discriminatory approach and first come, first served approach to that. Some of the larger suppliers raised a concern that they were being discriminated against by not being allocated to some of the earlier tranches. The argument was that they needed to be in order to get through migration with the number of MPANs that they have to complete. We've clarified the legal advice internally with our legal team, and it's very clear that non-discriminatory approach wouldn't allow for us prioritising large suppliers in the initial tranches. So we've kept the approach as we set out in the plan. Secondly, the second set of feedback we got was on the intention to qualify itself and what the timing of that. Some participants were concerned that leaving the allocation to tranches until next year or early part of next year wouldn't allow them enough certainty around their plans. So they were really keen that we move that forward to as soon as we're able to this year. We considered that. We're really keen to accommodate what people need wherever possible. But we were also hearing voices from some of the smaller participants that maybe weren't quite ready yet, that actually they weren't going to be in a position of knowing which tranche they were geared up for as early as that. So we sent out a consultation to see participants' views and make sure that we could take into account those views. And we only got a small number back. We only received 7, 4 of which said, can you keep it as it is? And 3 said, can you move it? Given that one of the reasons we were looking to move that is to ensure people were ready, but also to get a better understanding ourselves of the capacity we've got through qualification, the environments we've got available, and the numbers that we're actively going to be able to work. We've decided that we're going to keep the intention to qualify and the time for that as it is. Okay, thank you. If we can move on to the next slide. So the qualification approach and plan, if you like, that was the sort of second in the 3-tier approach I just set out at the beginning. So we've got the code, qualification approach and plan, and then the lower level document, which we will talk you through in a minute. So the qualification approach and plan is really setting out, if you like, the high level requirements and timescales and approach. We've had the first version iteration was approved last month. It has to go through a 3-pronged review. Some programme governance, some BSc governance and some REC governance. So it's approved by the TMAG for programme, the BSc PAB and the REC PAB. It's been through that 3-pronged approval process now. Essentially, there is going to be a number of iterations of this, and the reason we've got it set up that way is that we have to tally in nicely with the system integration testing development. So essentially what we'll be doing is we'll be waiting for the products that come from system integration testing, their associated approach and plans. We'll be looking at those, seeing how they need to be adapted for qualification and feeding those into the future iterations of the qualification approach and plan. So what we've got there is a clear view on the slides of when we're now expecting the system integration testing deliverables. Some of those have recently been moved. So in the first iteration of the plan, we set out, therefore, what you'd be expecting for qualification and when the qualification approach and plan iterations will be ready. But as those have just been moved, we're in a process of recalibrating with the programme on when those deliverables need to be undertaken. And we'll be providing further updates both through QWG and through the planning activity. So the sort of things you can expect going forward is not just the development on system integration testing, but also we're going to be working in some other areas into the development of the plan as well, such as the DIP onboarding activities that you're going to be hearing about later. They're going to have to interact with qualification, and we're going to need to get that process and alignment right, and we'll be working on that. We're looking at our placing reliance process. So at the moment there's a placing reliance policy. Bee's going to be talking to you a little bit more about that. But there's a placing reliance policy that the programme put in place. And we need to look at how we're going to adapt that for qualification. So the overall policy will be the same, but the process and how you go through that process for qualification needs to be defined. So that will be done through the qualification approach and plan as well. Okay, we're okay to move to the next slide, please. I'll hand over to Bee.
Thank you, Hannah. So the qualification assessment document is the second artifact that the code bodies are jointly delivering. In this qualification assessment document is where you'll find all the requirements you need to complete in order to gain that qualification, the approval of the BSc PAB and the record manager. So that document is, again, tied in with a few set artifacts, same principle that Anna just talked us through. So the baseline we're planning to get to you sometime around November, and that is that document itself is linked in with the set requirements traceability matrix and the functional test case scenarios. The reason for the first iteration is we want to give people a view as early as possible of what kind of requirements they're going to be expected to showcase for qualification. Subsequently, we will have another update to this document, and that update will depend on the various other set test scenarios and test case documents that will be delivered. And also the code drafting mop-up consultation that will occur. So for that, we're expecting that to land sometime in June. But again, timelines are being discussed with the program and between the code bodies. And all the planning is done with the view of an artifact lands. We've got 6 weeks to develop the qualification artifact and then take it through the 3-pronged approval cycle that Anna talked about. So the TMAC from the program and the 2 PABs. What else? So that is about when things are landing. What will be in the document? So the qualification assessment document itself will be split into 2 sections. So the first part would be the organization specific part. So that'll ask you details about your organization, what roles, qualifications you hold, etc. Your overall high level governance for this program, any sort of organizational level processes of change management and information security, how you're managing it, at the impacts of MHHS across those. Then there'll be the role-specific sections. You will only need to complete the sections which you are qualified for and that you want to be MHHS qualified for. And those will look at areas such as operational solution, the technical solution, processes and controls you've got in place to meet your various code requirements, and the testing requirements and how you've met them and the evidence around it. So just to give you an example, if you're an organization that's qualified in multiple roles and wants to be MHHS qualified in those multiple roles, you need to complete the organization specific section the one time and the various different role specific sections that apply, and each of those role specific sections would then need to be approved by the respective code body. So at this point, if I ask you to move to the next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is where it gives you, these are the program roles in the new world and their subsequent, like the related code body roles currently in the market, and the codes that you need to be qualifying for. For example, if you're a supplier, you need to complete the qualification and agree the qualification assessment document and get the approvals from BSc PAB and the record manager. If you're a meter equipment manager, then you need to only do that with the record manager. So that's an example. This slide pack's available to you. It'll be circulated later for reference. So brilliant. If we can move to the next slide, please. Placing reliance. So again, Anna touched upon it briefly earlier. We've got a placing reliance policy in place because we know many organizations may be delegating certain part of their operation, or they might be procuring technology from third parties. In this case, we want to get as much efficiency as possible. So we want people to be able to allow others to test on their behalf or place reliance on other participants that may have completed testing before them to show the same setup where it's in use. So for this purpose, the program has delivered the MHHS placing reliance policy. This policy itself has been approved by that three-pronged approach of the TMAC for the program and the two PABs for BSc and REC. That's now available for you all to refer to. That document itself gives you the process for placing reliance for SIT. So as a SIT part, like you may, if there's a participant going through SIT and they want to place reliance on or allow a third party to test on their behalf, the process is on there. If you're another party in the market who is going to be placing reliance on someone who's been through SIT or a different part of qualification testing, the process of that is being defined by the code bodies as we speak now, and it'll be developed along with the qualification working group. We do encourage all organizations to engage with the code bodies to sort of bring your case forward as to how you're planning to place a reliance and discuss those bits. We have a high-level process in place, which was taken to QWG yesterday. But again, as details are sort of designed and agreed, those will be added to the qualification approach and plan document. Brilliant. If we can move to the next slide, please. These are just some useful touch points as to how you can feed into the qualification development process. We've got the qualification and the testing working groups where the various artifacts are being developed that will feed into the qualification process. We've got the PC bilaterals, the MHHS website, like various other program links, the newsletter. And if you've got any sort of technical queries related to qualification, please send those to the testing mailbox of the IT help. So again, this information will be available to you. It'll be circulated later for your convenience. Brilliant. I think that is the last slide I need to be presenting. With that, I think I can pass over to you.